Okay, if you click it. There we go.
Geek Out number 40. Dungeon Lord, Otherworldly Powers. Wraith's Haunt, Book 2 by Hugo Huesca. Before I forget, plug that guy who has all that free music.
It is Harris Heller. The YouTube channel is called Stream Beats. I know him from his Alpha Gaming channel, of which is primarily about streaming and helping streamers figure out what product they should purchase, be it a capture card, a camera, software. He does a lot of that end, and that's how I found him. And then it's a side project for Stream Beats, and essentially he collaborated with people to create music, owns the rights to has a legal documentation set up saying that anybody can use it as background music, that he's not going to copyright strike people, that he's not going to, take all the monetization money and everything from whatnot, or bring people down.
Thank you. I've watched a couple of his videos, and there's a lot of good, hardworking people out there who stream, who have really gotten hurt by those copyright strikes, where I think you were telling me too, it's just like little clips in the background, and then all of a sudden, all their monetization's out the door, right?
Yeah, it's pretty common for whatever you're streaming just to have some mellow background music, and you just side chain it so that when you talk, it drops down and it's just, more entertaining. But then big companies were like, yoink. Yeah, big name streamers who were streaming for life or as a career are just losing everything, losing their channel. Anyway, I made this, so enjoy.
Boom.
Sorry. Yeah, boom. Sorry if audio levels are a little weird for me. I'm trying to break things, and
yeah. Good times.
Need to fine tune everything.
As always, the feedback's appreciated. If you guys feel something's off, let us know in the comments below. We do check and read all of those, though, depending on the week, not always immediately. I know some of our friends in the community, it seems like they reply instantly. Gosh, like this week just flew by, and I think there's a couple comments I still need to get back to and respond to on our channel. But we do read them. We do appreciate them. Positive vibes all the way around. And Dungeon Lord, Book 2. I forgot how much I enjoyed this book until I got back to it. It's been a minute since I've read the second one. We did the first one more recently for some new content, and then we did... So the fourth one came out relatively recently, right? Maybe not. Maybe it's like last 6 months.
A couple months.
Yeah.
Oh man, like the fourth one is where it's at.
I'm interested to see what happens in number 5, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of potential.
Our goal is to work up to those points with a handful of these series that we are huge fans of, give people the opportunity to kind of read along and talk with us on these channels. We know that they're not as popular because most of the lit RPG fans have already read them, but still doing it to give them the chance. And then the goal is to get current on a couple of these. That way, when they drop, we can talk with everybody and theory craft and do all that good stuff, which early plug is why we're doing the Stormlight Archive next week. Yes, book 3, Oathbringer. It's been out for a while. Amazing book. We are going to hit that next Sunday. Hopefully have a couple more of our buddies on. And then the following month, might try something new. There's already been some interest. Again, let us know on the comments or Discord. Might have an exclusive just theory crafting session for book 4 before that drops in November. Happy holidays to us. So, bringing it back on point. Otherworldly powers. End of book 1. Again, if you're new to this, spoilers ahead. End of book 1. Like, book 1 is just a couple days takes place, and they take out this mind brood that was terrorizing the town. It is essentially, how would you describe it, Pete? Like this parasitic monster?
If you have, what is it? Children of Ruin, which is another book, not super popular, sci-fi-esque. In the second book in the series, there's essentially a slime that eats people and becomes them, but that's not what this is. It starts off as like a slug, and then it gets into your body and it slowly eats your brain, and then it becomes your brain. And then after the, whatever caterpillar type lifestyle is over, it, eats your body completely. So it eats your brains first, becomes your brain, thinks you're who you are, but then it has like basic animalistic instincts for fight or flight. And we get to see a little bit of that in book 1 with the spiders through their ancestral memories from eating their previous queen to become the queen. They're able to tell what the mind brood smells like. And then same thing for the mind brood. They have ancestral memories of some sort that they understand what the spiders smell like and that it means trouble for them, so they react. But it is a big premise for this book, and we fought one book 1. We took out Ranger Ione, who brought it to Stravos.
Yes.
Sound right?
Yes.
And now in book 2, we have Nikolai, who has supposedly a dead mind brood that was injected into his arm. And strangely enough, like his whole body has like heightened recovery, because there's a scene towards the I guess middle where Catalan throws a knife into his eye and he just kind of like spasms, almost falls over, stands back up, and he's completely fine. He just pulls it out and regens.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was trying to figure out a bit with Nikolai, where in the first book with the little girl, we get some perspective points from her, and you could tell that she's clearly the mind brood at that point because like of the overlap with the ancestral memories for the mind brood, right?
Yeah.
Like she thinks about her family, but then she also does things that are clearly not a little girl, like running across the wall and stuff like that.
I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that she was so little and so young that the mind brood didn't have as much nutrients.
Right.
And that's kind of why Ranger Ione said, oh, well, I put it in a little girl on purpose. That way I could, be the savior and save the day and blah, blah, blah.
Right. Be the hero, so on and so forth. But in the second book, we find out that he's connected to these cultists / rebels / Stravos independent fighters that are led by Nikolai, who has a mind brood. And a bit of foreshadowing from book 1, they start calling Edward Lord Wraith, and then we open up book 2 with a Wraith Resurrection, and the gods and their intervention are just so fun, right? As Halan, the boatman,
Haran. Yeah.
Shows up to pick him up, and Edward is pretty much like, buzz off, except for he uses another word for it, and he plays his little manipulation. But the damsel in distress, he's like, he knew that would work, that manipulation. And the damsel in distress ends up being the daughter of the Wraith when he was alive, before he became a Wraith. And just like all the interconnecting dots in the back with the lore there was so well done.
Yeah, I really like it because it kind of feels like a D&D module where it gives you a bit of the backstory, this thief in Undercity who had her drink spiked and now is in a dungeon, and they use part of her blood to start a ritual. And then it's actually her father, and then you go on and get a little more backstory. We get involved with it.
Yes. It's good, and you're right. Like, I keep thinking of D&D when reading this book, and Hugo's clearly a D&D fan, so it reads like a D&D. It's more of like a D&D lit than it is like a video game lit for me, though it is in a quote video game world, and
of which was a real world all along.
What is real?
Yeah.
So yeah, I really enjoyed the lore building in this book. He did a great job kind of like expanding it, helping us connect the dots between the gods and their intervention in plans, and how the dark gods will still make deals and they'll always follow through on it, but doesn't mean they won't set you up for failure in the process.
I enjoy the what's the line right before the damsel in distress thing, when he's like, I'm sending you alone because if I brought Kessel Green, then the light would get a free pass to stop an orphanage from burning down. And Right is at this point, Ed is just fuming and like, so you're telling me if I go and I help you out, the light will get a free pass to stop an orphanage from burning down? And then he goes through the whole like connecting the dots. Well, if the orphanage doesn't burn down, they grow into soldiers. If they grow into soldiers and they fight our guys, they kill our guys. If our guys are dead, then the dungeon lords can't sacrifice them for the extra power. And it's just like, the whole maps it out.
Yes. So well done. So much fun. We also get a lot more of the settlement building that we enjoy. I kind of had some life reset feels a little bit there, as like the goblin overlord, dungeon lord, kept ranking up his settlement because he took in all the villagers from, what was it, Stravos? And the reason he did that is because the almighty, all good light, quote unquote, would come in and purge them because they don't want any other mind broods going out and infecting all these other villages. So it's just wipe everyone out at all cost, eliminate the risk. So all these innocent villagers would die, even though Edward knows that they weren't infected. So this evil dungeon lord that has such a bad rap takes all these people in, and then those he releases into different villages to kind of disperse the population and get them back out there. But a handful decide to stay with him, and then a handful more they just can't trust out there, right? There were like the village drunk. all these other people that, you know, that just can't keep their mouth shut. So he more or less keeps them as prisoners to help protect all these other people. And of course, they don't see that, and they cause problems for him throughout the story. But the blacksmith and the herbalist,
Or yeah, alchemist, herbalist.
alchemist, decide to stay with him and really become crucial players. And sorry, you had something to chime in there?
Or well, I for this one, it felt kind of weird because yeah, we're advancing the dungeon and we're building up our power base, but at the same time, the plan is for these people to go on and do their own thing, but he's still utilizing them. And then I think at the very end, it turns out that Yorche, the blacksmith, signs a pact.
Mm-hmm. Becomes
And a couple other
becomes an
people.
actual minion and
Yeah.
all that good stuff. Yeah. Oh, the feels at the end there when the blacksmith and, man, I'm drawing a blank. I'm the one with
Oh, all the
name for
people are sitting behind the seat, and
yeah. Like
oh, who's the mind brood guy?
you just said, Nicholas, right?
Yeah,
Nikolai.
Nikolai. When Nikolai just starts laughing, or it's like the governor comes out and he's like, "Well, I'm here for you to admit your surrender,"
Mm-hmm.
and then he sees all the other people pop out with their crude weapons and their farming implements and the
Yes.
backlands, and he just
Yes.
starts busting out laughing. He's just
Yes.
like, "Oh, thank you for rounding yourself up."
Yeah, because it all starts, he starts down that path instead of doing what the cultists were initially going to do, because he wanted revenge, right? His love ends up getting killed by Edward
Yeah.
um, during the resurrection. So he decides to go after Edward, thinking that it will be easy done deal. And because like in the beginning he was talking, Edward only got 20 experience points for the death, and I really appreciate how they broke down and explained the carpenter and the was it
Oh,
the
the idiot in the carpenter line.
yeah. Remind me to come back to that. But Edward only earned 20 experience points, so Nicholas wanted to go and kill 20 of his loved ones to be even, and allowed himself to get diverted from his overall goal of, you know, overthrowing. Um,
All the nobles and the people who don't have
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Cerebosian blood.
mm-hmm.
But I really enjoy how it opens up with Catalan, and then it goes off to Edward, and currently he's being trained by Kessa of Green, who initially was like, "I'm going to, ruin all your plans, figure out what you're doing, and destroy you." But then by the end of one, she's like, "All right, so maybe you got a raw deal. Maybe we can make this all work." And so they start doing physical training, trying to bring up their martial prowess,
Yeah.
which ends up saving Ed's bacon several times over.
Yes, she ends up becoming like his biggest supporter, and she's just such a fun character because she's broken in her own way, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah,
And then the excuse of gotta check on Catalan, but we're gonna, become the next black market baron with our alcohol ploy.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
It
that, yeah.
This book does such a good job keeping it interesting, engaging, and rich, even though he's still such a low level dungeon lord, right? Like there's several moments where he looks back to when he was a MMO gamer, 10 years ago when the game was super popular, playing, referring back to his raid days and how like all his common minions, he wouldn't even stop to kill because it was a waste of time. He wouldn't get any XP for it. Yet the battles are intense, engaging, they're scaling up, he's honing his skills.
And then we also get to see the other perspective because we got to see, the majority of Nikolai working on summoning the Wraith, working on creating his portal, infiltrating initially when he goes out and starts collecting people that they're going to sacrifice for the XP and talking to, the guy who's going to scry their location and all that.
Yeah, the pixie dust user or whatever. I forget his actual title.
Yeah, it's interesting the way we get to see both sides, and then yet again just makes Ed feel that much more real when he's first infiltrating after Haran drops him off, and there is adult content. It is quite graphic for the language, but
yes, it's and we talked a bit about that, trying to really hammer it down with the first book because we like to do ratings every so often, and it's not a clear-cut T for teen, but it's not a clear-cut M for mature. So yeah, and part of that is it's just so real. And we were talking about this a bit before we got on air, that for me in this book, Edward, he just feels so real and genuine. You can tell that Hugo is very much a gamer and, just an average bloke at times, because a lot of times in fantasy books that you read, the heroes and the characters are just so majestic, and, they really fall into their like lawful good category, or, so on and so forth, where here we have Edward dealing with all these zombies and everything, and borderline getting overwhelmed, and he's just dropping F-bomb after F-bomb after F-bomb. And it's like, you know what? Everybody thinks that come the zombie apocalypse, they're going to be the guy on the front lines doing all these sweet moves, like slaying zombies, totally owning it. But if we're being honest with ourselves, I would probably be in the same boat, trying to keep myself in check, dropping F-bomb after F-bomb after I just cut down these zombies coming at me, and not trying to lose my cool in the process, right?
That, and it's great the way he brings back reality, because he talks about, like you were saying, how the video games he's killed so many and all this other stuff, but then when you're actually there, so it was made the character feel real and made it just made that little arc for me.
I 100% agree with you there. So a lot of fun characters, kind of get some of the adventuring feel, a bit of the dungeon builder feel. We can see it start to come together. And the big thing with this book was both parties knew that this conflict was coming, right? Between the guys that raised the Wraith and the Haunt, Edward's dungeon. And
well, it's funny how that all came to be too, and that was masterfully done, because Edward had been looking through his talents and trying to figure out what to purchase, and he ends up getting the I forget the name, the aura that makes it so his minions don't feel fear. And due to that, he's able to pact with Nikolai, and Nikolai's like, all right, as long as you don't read my stat sheet. And then they're able to hold it off long enough that way you can, so Catalan can unlock the gate and all that. And then after breaking the pact, there's a grace period where you still can't take actions against them.
Right. Yeah. So well done. Trying to think which direction I was going with that. A lot happens in the book, but it's a relatively quick read.
We get dungeon powering up. We get our arc or our module, Wraith in Undercity, Damsel in Distress, Black Market Baron.
Yes.
Leveling up our dungeon and doing it for everybody. And then the ending being, they're going to send the Wraith after us in a two-prong approach. And then we essentially play into their hand. Kleck, everybody always forgets Kleck. He, stays true to himself, and
he's such a fun character.
Yeah.
Right? Like, even though he's this little Batland monster guy, like, you can't help but love him as, he's even the lowest of the low within his group, and the Batlands are the lowest of the low, yet he's the Ranger Slayer and chooses to go and train with them to the point where even Kess, kind of has a little crush for the guy. Like, don't think I'm just going to go easy on you. And he's like, he's the only one that's not complaining, where
everybody else is complaining about training.
Yeah.
What's the line? Oh, scary rock lady, maybe you'll break another nail and, start crying. She's like, we said we would never talk about that again.
Yes.
But he does have a moment that didn't seem as grand, but was still grand when he saves all the other Batlands from using his pack tactics with the spider Tulip. And sorry, side note, that was another just like, I do this all the time, and I enjoyed it when Ed comes back from his first encounter with the Wraith, and he runs into the spider in the forest, and he's trying to remember her name, and it's like, oh, there's so many spiders, I'm never going to remember it. But he's like, okay, this is a queen based off the side. She has an asterisk on her, but an asterisk looks like a star, which could look like a flower, and he just like goes through all these connecting dots. And then he's like, oh, Tulip.
Yes. And another thing I really appreciate about Edward is, before he had his heart switched out and became the Dungeon Lord, he was essentially a peon at the equivalent of like Geek Squad, right? Except for they call it Laser Shark. And, he was a grunt, had an awful boss, et cetera. And he constantly looks back at that and thinks about it when he approaches his leadership, right? Like, so many of the other Dungeon Lords, so many of the other people, they don't make time to remember their minions' names. They don't do all that. Like, he doesn't have to, but he chooses to do the little, tricks to help him remember who's who and remember their names. And I'm sure you can relate to it, being both an employee and a manager, how much of a difference that makes, right? When
simple... the little things in life, like telling someone they did a good job, congratulating them on a good shift. I can't remember if it was you or part of my training. It's the compliment sandwich, where you tell them something good, and then you bring in the negative of where you feel that they can improve, and then you flip it over, and you pretty much tell them that it happens. None of us are perfect, and I've seen you be successful, and get a compliment.
And not so much negative, but like, whatever it is,
constructive criticism.
Whatever it is you need to address, right? But like, you keep the vibes overall positive, and you come in high and positive, get to whatever you need to get to, and then you leave out positive and everything, and remind everybody like they're part of that team. And with Edward, we constantly see that, and like, his minions respect him that much more for it. And they constantly are like, hey, it's just as much self-interest for us. You're supposed to be in the back and be the final boss, right? The boss fight. And in the very end, they're constantly joking about it, saying, well, he should be in his dungeon room, on his throne, but it's Edward. Where do you think he is? And they're like, oh, he's at the front lines, right?
Yeah, taking on the Wraith by himself, for all I know.
And sure enough, like, when stuff hits the fan and really starts to go down at the end there, like, he goes from trying to convince these villagers that, hey, we're doing this to protect you. You're trying to run away. The spiders are like, oh, let us just, bite them and, put them into paralysis. They'll go down, and the people are like, oh, you're a dungeon lord. You're evil. Like, look at those eyes. We're going to fight you. We're going to, and it's essentially suicidal for them. Yet he's advocating putting up with their nonsense to try to protect them, and then chooses to stay there and fight, risking himself so they can get away, even though they were
buying them the time.
Yeah, even though they were causing all these problems. He's staying on the front lines, buying them time, giving his minions time to prepare defenses, get the haunt ready, and being a truly good leader and leading from the front, right? And prioritizing the greater good of the haunt than just self-interest. And it can backfire. It can be suicidal at times, but more often than not, we saw it inspired loyalty in his minions. And even though Kess wanted to go and rush to his aid and help him out, she's like, there's a chain of command. This is what we need to do. And they kept following that example that he led by, and keeping things moving along. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the way multiple things are always going on, and we had the final Wraith battle, and everyone's joking about how Edward's going to be the one out soloing the Wraith, and it turns out that when Ed gets there, Catalin's the one out soloing the Wraith, and it's just funny listening to her internal dialogue where she's like, if you have a enchanted weapon, that's just for people who can't fight, can't defend themselves, and it turns out that, her bacon's cooked, or however you want to say it, because she needs an enchanted weapon to even be able to affect the Wraith. And the whole scene when Ed finally gets to Catalin, and he's like, oh, hey, over here, and he thinks that she's just jumped down the throat of the Wraith, but instead all her acrobatic skills and her advanced dodge and everything else, and she escapes. And then you get that funky lost in translation or different verbiage when he's got the spiders and I can't remember the Kaftar's name with him, and he's like, okay, or Kaga, okay, Kaga, you pull aggro, you go this way, spiders, you go this way. And they're like, aggro, you want us to sacrifice ourselves? And he explains it. It's like, no, just get the attention. Then we'll switch the attention. And that way, even though he can't affect the Wraith, he's found an alternative to buy him time and continue to advance. And meanwhile, we've got Nicholas attacking the haunt, and Kessa is saving all the peons while she has her captain's voice in her head, and just a lot going on.
She's so fun, and I really enjoyed that moment when they were fighting the Wraith. And the comment that came to mind was, again, like, another great lesson is, for every problem there's a creative solution, right? Just because they can't take it head on, they do, or just
because you don't have a win condition right now,
yes,
kiting it and pulling aggro around until you can figure out your win condition.
Yes.
And which works out because, he didn't know, but this is when Kessa is talking to Alder, the bard. I don't need you to be a hero. I just need you to be a bard.
Oh, man, the feels
collecting all the stuff.
He had the illusion of Edward being all BA.
Yeah,
right there.
Super evil eyes, decked out in his armor and everything.
Yeah. That's the other thing I appreciate. Like, it's so real, and even the bard kind of calls him out, like, man, my one-liners are so much better than yours. And sure enough, when he has him being all epic and, glory and the illusion and everything. He's like saying all this awesome stuff. It's like, yeah, no, that's totally not Edward. Like that's what epic dungeon lord could be, but Edward is this programmer slash dork, and yeah,
Hasn't quite got his evil villain monologue down.
exactly. And I had so many laugh out loud moments there towards the end when like Nikolai was going through those tropes and everything, where he's like,
You
what
need
am
to
I?
gloat.
Yeah, am I not worthy? Like, where's your monologue? Tell me about your evil plan so I have time to reach in and take you down, and et cetera, et cetera. And everybody's the hero of their own story, right? And you get to see that a bit with Nikolai, where he thinks he's the hero and this to come slay the dungeon lord and do all that good stuff. But in the end, he ends up just being ashes as they go.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And that's where we get our armor upgrade, because we're still
Yes.
wearing the stuff from book 1, the guardsman armor.
Yeah, and he's still in his white running shoes from Walmart. I got a kick out of that. What's the thief slash rogue's name again?
Oh, Catalan.
Catalan, right? Where she spends a little time in his world, and she's like, "Oh man."
Haran.
She's like, "What would I do for 10 minutes with the guards looking the other way and there?" And Edward's like, "Yeah, Walmart's really not that great."
Or no, his line is, "Don't say stuff like that. You don't know who's listening and will want to take you up on the offer." And she's like, "Oh yeah, you just want to keep all the loot for yourself."
Oh yeah, she's a fun character too. I also got a good chuckle out of after they have their moment of romance when
Alder and Kess come back in.
Oh yeah, that's a hoot. But I was thinking the morning after when they're getting ready and Alder and Kess are like asking him like, "So where's this going? What are your plans?" And they start giving him a hard time about his romantic interest choices, joking that eventually he's going to end up with some vampire or whatever as his lady.
Vampire dungeon lady, vampire dungeon lady.
Yeah. And then a couple chapters later, same bit with
Catalan and her friend.
Yeah. Where her friend turns around just like all good friends do and start to give you a hard time about your previous choices and call her out. And she, dated a barbarian or something at one point that bathed in the blood of his enemies and wore a bunch of shriveled heads around his waist, and just like necromancer detective or something like that. And so funny. The book is a good balance. I know we keep saying it's dark fantasy, and it is dark fantasy, and it is very mature, but there were just so many good laugh out loud moments. And it's typically after not typically after, but several times it was after those emotional roller coasters where they had those intense moments of conflict, like when the thieves jumped them at the canal with Kermit and everything, and Edward proves that he's a good guy by letting them go, which pays off in the end. It was a gamble, but pays off as they end up being his new contacts as his love interest. Yeah. As they scale up their brewing operation. So funny, like the dungeon lord, their primary income is bootlegged booze.
So I see Catalan coming back, because now, book 1 we had Levi, and then book 2 we had Catalan, and that whole cliche, if you love it, let it go. If it's true love, it will come back. And
okay.
I could see them working out.
Yeah.
In the future. That would be a cool, yet, I called it. If it happens, you heard it here first. kind of moment, you know?
Yeah, I could see it. And I haven't really read too much about his plan with the series, but we're at book 4, and I'm really curious to see what comes of book 5. We'll get there. Yeah,
yeah, there.
No spoilers.
Each book just scales so much because the very first book, where a newborn baby, oh man, he has so many baby jokes anyway, or references like when he's in the when Haran brings him over, he's going up against Nikolai and all them, and he's like, oh wow, that guy looks like he was dropped into a bucket of steroids as a baby. Anyway,
Yes.
yeah, I forgot the other line of thought.
Yes.
Oh yeah, progression. So first one, pretty much brand new to the world, end up taking on a thing of Batlins, get our 2 companions, and then Kleck as a third one. And then we end up scaling all the way up to taking on a Mind Brood. And because he's seen as a weak target, he's able to get in close and take it out. And book 2, we're working on our dungeon building. We're getting the girl, doing our thing, daddy issues out the wazoo. And then we end up battling a Wraith and winning with our Kaga from the Cackle and Catalan, and we get the whole joke from the first time meeting Dad went well.
Yeah, she had to get that zinger in that this is the dungeon lord I'm sleeping with or whatever, as she taunts Daddy Wraith. Yeah, it does scale though. I felt like, because he took over a queen, right? And you think that he has this whole big army of spiderlings, yet there's really not that many. There's like 2 to 3 princesses, and I think there's like less than 20 warriors as they're battling with the other 5 spider queens and losing territory and everything. And then at the end, he picks up the Cackle. Kleck is out trying to find other Batlins to bring to the haunt. They're conquering the other spiders, and for the first time ever, it's never happened in memory, Edward is using his minion pact ability to kind of set up an spider empire, right?
Yeah.
Where he sets his spider queen at the top and then uses his pact magic to take over the other spiders. And it really just makes you wonder, like, if this keeps scaling, do you think we'll eventually get to some like true army like fights and everything? Because we're dealing with some of these big kingdoms in the background, but if he keeps scaling himself up, he could be an army in it of itself, right?
Yeah, for that Kaladin comment, that's next week for the Stormlight. But this is where it gets kind of like super scaly, because the end of 1, our big thing was we had a Mind Brood. I can't remember the guy's name, but the something Bane. Anyway, so we were afraid that we were going to get purged. The Inquisitors were going to hear about it, and Gallia was going to go off, and we were all going to be screwed. But they deal with that nicely. A lot of people have diversified and gone elsewhere. That way, they weren't there. Alibi. I was here all along. Whatever. And some of the people who stayed end up benefiting us, which is great, because we got the blacksmith and we got the alchemist. And then, for this book, it was completely out of left field for a side quest of a Wraith. And then at the end of 2, Haran comes back and he's pretty much like, oh, just paying you a visit. Yeah, so Alita totally knows where you're at. The light
Mm-hmm.
god is
Mm-hmm.
going to send people. Just a heads up, she's got quite a sense of humor. I wonder who's going to end up coming up against you.
Yes.
And yeah,
Yes.
it's
And sure enough, in the epilogue, we get to see.
Ryan get the quest.
I appreciate how it points out the fact that of all his perfect features, he now has a crooked nose thanks to Edward.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So it hints at so much more because now we've got Alita, the light god, looking at us, who's possibly going to send heroes against us.
Mm-hmm.
We're going,
Well, they get the
supersonic.
quest
Yeah.
in the game itself. We get the quest at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry,
But
keep
she's
going.
also got forces in the realm or world that she could
Mm-hmm.
be sending.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
We
we
get
now have more wraith like powers from pouring the holy water down the wraith's eye socket.
mm-hmm.
And then, yeah.
The book does a good job giving us some more lore, amazing character building, scaling things up, answering a lot of those questions, and then in doing so, kind of giving us some more questions, right? Like we get little snapshots of Edward's history. And granted, we're 2 books beyond this, so we know a little bit more, but minor spoilers, even with that in mind, there are some subtle hints about Edward's past that we get in this book, right? Where he talks about he's seen death before and talks about how something to do with his uncle. There was this extreme accident or whatever. So he's seen carnage before. He's buried both of his parents. So he's dealt with death before. And we get that on one hand. And then on the other side, this story is all about how the dark manipulated Catelyn's father and everything there. So without saying anything, it kind of makes you wonder, is
Oh,
this
yeah.
foreshadowing? Is
It's
this
a very
coincidence?
narrow picture because of our main character, but it's developing the lore of the world. And, like in book 2, they mention, when Taurus, who was our wraith for this book,
Mm,
Catalan's father ended up killing off those nobles and started the war against, the factions, which gave the Dark a chance to build up their power base again. And the whole reason we brought you is because you've got a different perspective and you've got a new way of going about things and doing stuff. And last time, or end of book 1, he gives him Murmur's Reach, which we don't use until the end of 2. But
right.
then after seeing how well he dealt with the Mind Brood and the Wraith and everything else he has going on for the power plays, he's like, hey, do you want a promotion? Do you want to be the manager of all the Dark? And we'll get all of Underworld's power under you and this, that, and the other. And he's pretty much like, nope, not going to
Yeah.
happen. And then Haran comes back and he's like, that's one thing I like about you. You're reasonable. And I hope you see reason before everybody you know and love dies.
Bum, bum,
Yeah.
bum. That would be hard to pass on, though. And he does it for good reason because he just lived through what happened with the Dark God's intervention, right? And dealing with all
Yeah.
that stuff. Yet, if your goal, like he said himself, even when he used Murmur's Reach, I'm one cultist and one wraith past caring about what I said before or something
Yeah.
like that. Like that's his mindset. And he's dealing with all these impossible challenges. And then to have, this God basically say, hey, from your experience in playing this game, you are a minnow, a small fish when it comes to dungeon lords. how about I put you on top of all those and you have all those resources and power to deal with this stuff? Like, that's a hard pass to be like, you know what? Stay in your lane, dude. Like, light gods can do their thing, dark gods can do their thing. The haunt, we're going to do our thing. Like, stay in your lane, boy.
Yeah, and the way we keep bending objectivity, and that was another
Yes.
thing this book did well, where Alder's whole idiot or carpenter line, and how some people get lucky and do idiotic things, and they'll get more experience points because of it, but because they don't train and dedicate their time to it, they're going to die early. And then the carpenter's the other side, where they get a trait, they don't take a lot of risks, and they're going to, be successful. Their skills don't cost a whole lot of experience points, and they'll probably get to see their grandkids. And he needs to find someone who's right in the middle, kind of like Kessel.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting that we got the whole Kessa of Green's backstory about how she was an avian in an army and everybody's dead, but she still hears the words of her
sergeant
in her head.
Yeah. So here's a question for you, Pete. Where do you think we fall on the idiot and carpenter line?
I've been very carpenter for a couple of years now. I do my 9 to 5 and I survive.
Yeah.
But if I could rule the world and this takes off, I could see going more towards the middle of the line. But as of right now, I've got responsibilities and I love my job.
As you can clearly hear in the sound of his voice. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think I'm probably there with you too. Younger days, maybe a little bit more on the idiot side of the access, but definitely more carpenter. Yeah. Gosh, does that just mean we're old carpenters now?
I still think for me 5 years is still short in the lifespan.
Fair enough. So MVP for this book, excluding Edward.
There were a lot of good ones, like Catalin for the sense of humor, for getting the money off the get-go, for I'm pretty sure she's going to come back. Click gets his moment, saving his whole Batman horde.
Clout? Is that what they call them? They're Clout?
Or Cloud.
I don't know.
Anyway.
It's hard to always catch the D's and the T's when you're listening at 3x.
Yeah, I've been doing 2 because, hours work out. 20 hours for a 10-hour day. Just,
there you go.
It works. Anyway, I don't know. And then Kessa of Green also for the initial training for saving Ed's bacon, throughout most of the book.
Yeah,
and then she also saves, everybody in the haunt. And then there are so many, like without Yorche, the blacksmith, setting up the whole
I was going to bring him up.
Warm, and then Edward being able to drop him 2 stories and cripple him and then bury him and then burn him. And I don't know, there's a lot of like minor characters that it wouldn't have been able to be successful without it.
I agree with you on all fronts. The blacksmith definitely came to mind for me, and I think he was a big part in having some of the other guys get won over with just the different village people that sign on, including the alchemist and some of the others. So A lot of good players, and that's another reason why I enjoy this series. It's not just about one guy.
Well, and that's one of the forward backwards moments for me is like initially I felt like we're building our party where we've got, Kessa the tank,
mm,
Alder or the buffer, and then Levy the direct damage, and Edward being, kind of a multi-class mid stuff. But
hmm
then at the end, we're all split. Alder's trying to get to Edward to fight the Wraith.
Yes,
Kessa's taking on the boss coming in, and
yes.
then Levy's, just barely surviving. And it turns out the Hell Chickens, come to her rescue and just like,
That was such a fun scene.
yeah, I enjoyed that. And then same
Yeah.
thing with the Murmur's Reach during it, where she can tell what emanation based on how many degrees the temperature drops. I thought that was,
Yeah.
insightful.
I enjoy her fight scene there and everything. And when she just again it pushes it into the more mature-ish rating, but it just feels so authentic for their attitude where like she's analyzing the giant as he's going and trying to justify how he's going to kill this helpless girl, and she kind of gets that defiant moment and she's just like, do it, bleep. And it's like, like some books they like to sugarcoat it and everything, but like
Yeah,
when
that's
you're gonna really call somebody out and poke them, um, yeah,
you get to see the internal struggle because at the beginning, I think the guy she goes up against is calling her like a witch. And
mm,
then when she's basically her back to a wall, starts calling her girl
yeah,
and trying to justify it. And just like you get to that point where, more or less you snap and you got to execute on that fight or flight.
yeah.
And she's already, fled, but it ends up working out. So she's got to go 180 and 110% the other direction.
And then when she's doing the whole like head games with the hell chickens and everything,
Oh
like
yeah,
she just like,
talking about Alder, and then she's like, "Oh, they're intelligent. They did this, they did that," analyzing your situation.
yeah, and the ones in front about ready to attack her and everything. She's like, "Oh, you think they're there to back you up, but you're the scout. They're going to eat you too."
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. A lot of good LOL moments throughout this book. It's a fun book. If you guys are watching this and you haven't read it yet, it's a lot of fun. Definitely a series we recommend checking out. A good, healthy blend between lit RPG and dark fantasy, in my opinion. It's not super lit.
reads
Uh,
kind of D&D esque.
it reads more D&D esque, and it is a lot of fun. The characters are relatable. They have their flaws. I don't think anybody's overpowered. Do you?
Mm, not really, no, because everybody gets the beep kicked out of them at one point or another,
Yeah,
and
some of them multiple
I
times.
I wish I had the quote, but essentially towards the end when Alder is composing his song, we get that side of it. But anyway, when Edward and Alder are talking, they're like, am I a good person? And he pretty much says, well, go talk to all those villagers who now have a home who you saved, ask them. And
Hmm.
then, kind of vice versa for I want to say Nathaniel, but that doesn't sound right. Nikolai. The same thing with Nikolai, where he literally sacrificed people to the wraiths so that they could have specters for their
Hmm.
initial assault. And yeah, you get that reflection of the situation where he's like, where did it go wrong? And he's just like slowly playing it back. And it's like, oh, it went wrong here. Oh, it went wrong there. Oh, just
Hmm.
kidding. It went wrong way before.
So many people get lost in the end justifies the means, right?
Yeah.
And this book is a good one at articulating that's not always true. And Same with Edward. While it's important to have your convictions, sometimes you have to bend
You
a
just
little
need to
bit.
reassess. Well,
Yeah.
but that's one of the things that I really like for like when we finally get to Catalan and the Wraith is attacking and he tells the spider and Kaga to pull aggro. It's like, well, it's a win condition. He can't damage it, but due to all these other things, it can't really damage him either. So that's just cat and mouse until he figures out his win condition. So being able to reassess, and then after that, it's like, yay, we won. Just kidding. Everybody you know and love is about to die. And so he has to reassess and
and push himself just that much further.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome book. Wrapping things up. Did we miss anything? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I probably missed something, but it's 20 hours of content.
Yeah, we always do, which just means that it leaves it open for us to come back and talk about it again.
I guess update for stuff. I have a couple videos of kind of like back end stuff for how I do things. And yeah, I'll be sharing more technical back end stuff. We do have the summary recap for the first book done. Might as well continue with the summary recaps, which is essentially designed to be as factual as possible in the progression and what really happens in it. That's coming up. And then next Sunday, as we said, is going to be Oathbringer, which is the third book in the Stormlight archives.
Yeah.
It is typically the last slot in our month, just because the new one's coming out in November. Next month, potential for theory crafting, what we know as a whole. So next week, Oathbringer. Next month, possibly theory crafting. It really depends on community and comments below and or in Discord. And a lot of this has been stuff that we enjoy. Like I absolutely love, the Dungeon Lord series, but it's not super common. So we need to find a healthy, happy medium of epic fantasy worlds to traverse with other people.
There's just too many. That's part of the challenge. There's so many we want to talk about, and with our current schedule, we only get to about 50 a year. So yeah.
Yeah, well, we're dedicated to Sunday being something every time.
Nice little escape from reality into our fantasy realms where we can fight wraiths, dragons, find the most important words a man can say.
I guess that was another funny line. What is it when he did I just create life? Good game. Story's over. Haran, no sweat. Take it out.
Yeah. So many good LOL moments. So yeah, next Sunday, currently doing it at our normal time. Reach out to us if you're interested and in joining us for that. Always love having more people on here. Change it up from Peter and I just, back and forth being on the same wavelength 95% of the time. But yeah, thanks for joining us, guys.
Bye.
Bye.